Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Man, let there be football, man. Championship Saturday is here, so I'm a little bit more geeked up than normal. I can't wait for later today, and this show is going to be off the chain. So listen, all of this talk about the College Football Playoff Committee and where teams should be ranked and who should be in or what have you, just let me solve the problem. Let your boy handle it. I'm going to give you my criteria as if Bam were on the College Football Playoff Committee. You're going to love it, unless you hate it. All right, in the second down, I'm picking every single championship game in the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. And there's a common theme in each of those championship games. You want to know what it is? You got to watch the show, man. In my nonsense narrative, I love rivalry games, but I think people love them too much, and they put more on them than need to be. And I'm talking specifically Auburn, Alabama, and Ohio State, Michigan. So that's my nonsense narrative. Hey, and in the final drive, there's a program right now that I think is a destination program, not just in college football, but as a whole when it comes to sports. All that and more right here on Move the Chains, but you know what time it is. Let's kick it off at first down. All right? So I'm placing myself on a College Football Playoff Committee, meaning me, myself, and I. I'm the only person. And I'm going to give you my 4 criteria that I have. And before I do that, because I've got a great graphic with a handsome face on it as well. But before I do that, I want to tell you what's not on my criteria. The eye test. Yeah. You know, what people say, hey, well, it's the eye test. This team just looks better. I don't care if they've lost 4 or 5 games or they have one ranked win versus the best teams in America. I don't care. The eye test, they look like the best team. What you're saying is they're very talented, but they underachieve. Get out of here. Hypothetical spreads and game scenarios. You know what I mean. If Team A were to play Team B on a neutral field, Team A or B would be favored by 12 points, so that makes them the better team. Well, why don't we just run a simulation in Madden or in NCAA football and not play the game? Hypothetical spreads, in my estimation, have no bearing on who is better and who's most deserving, because those terms are not mutually exclusive in my estimation. Injuries projecting performance. I like to call this the Florida State or the FSU doctrine. You know how they left out Florida State because Jordan Travis got hurt and they assumed they weren't going to be good? That's ridiculous. I'm looking at the entire body of work. What also won't be on there, quality losses. Man, this has become a thing of epic proportion. People will sit there and say, hey, I lost to this team just barely. We barely lost to this team. Yet your best resume includes the best losses? What are we doing? So like I said, I wanted to dispel and get those out of the way right now. You will not see those on BAM's college football criteria list, but you will see these. Give me my graphic. All right, let's start here. Number 1, quality wins. And if you notice in parentheses, I have ranked opponents when played. When I'm talking about quality wins, if you're a program that has beaten 4 teams throughout the season, and those 4 teams were ranked when you beat them, those are 4 ranked wins. I don't understand for the life of me why now we try to look at post-situational opportunities of saying, well, this team is ranked now, so it counts for or counts against the team because they beat them or did not beat them. Let's go back to Texas and Michigan, because Josiah and I, the producer of the show, were talking about this beforehand. Do you remember when Texas went to Michigan and put it on them? Like blasted Michigan. Michigan was ranked at the time. I believe Michigan was ranked in the top 10 at the time. I didn't rank them. It was the AP poll who ranked them, whom we pay attention to. So that's a ranked win. And Michigan was also a team that beat Ohio State. So should Texas not get credit for a ranked win because Michigan's no longer ranked? What if Michigan losing to Texas was the reason Michigan didn't have the season that they anticipated after winning a national championship last year? What if Michigan would have beaten Texas and that would propel them to an 8-win, 10-win season? You don't know that. You know what you do know? Texas throttled Michigan at home. And because of that, it's a ranked win. So I don't like to say quality wins and then tell me that a team is ranked or unranked 6 weeks later, and that has any bearing on what you did when you beat them. If you beat them when you played them, that is a ranked and it is a quality win, and it is about winning the football game. So first and foremost, I want to know how many quality wins a team has, whether it's within their conference or outside of their conference. All right? Let me get my second piece of criteria here. Strength of schedule. Again, conference and non-conference. So a lot of people like to say, well, you know what? The Big Ten is not the same as the SEC, and the ACC is not the same as the Big Ten, and the Big 12 is not the same as the SEC. I agree wholeheartedly, which is why strength of schedule is very prominent on my list of criteria. Because typically you take the winning percentages of all the teams that you've beaten and you divide it by the total number of teams. That is how you calculate strength of schedule. I'm a math nerd, so I wanted to throw that out there. So if I'm looking at two teams that are 10-2, that are pretty close, I want to look at whom you've beaten. Because what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to reward a team that, one, didn't challenge themselves outside of the non-conference, and two, a team that had a conference that was clearly not on par with the other team's conference. It matters. So in addition to quality wins, your strength of schedule is important when it comes to my college football criteria, because all wins are not created equal. And I'm going to give credit to the teams that have a tougher schedule, but they still got to win those football games. All right, give me my next piece of criteria. Head-to-head matchups. Listen, I understand, like I said, that Michigan beat Ohio State. We all know that happened. Michigan was a better team that day, but there's a reason that Ohio State was a 23.5 point favorite or whatever it was, 3-touchdown favorite. Now, Michigan was better that day, and they've owned Ohio State the last 4 seasons. But does that mean Michigan should be ranked ahead of Ohio State? I know they're not, but there's a reason, because upsets matter. But when it comes to teams, look at a South Carolina and an Alabama. Now, if these two teams, which Alabama is and South Carolina is, 13th or so in the college football playoff rankings? If these teams were neck and neck, they've both got 3 quality wins in my estimation, 3 ranked wins versus the top 25, and they both have 3 losses. So what would be the deciding factor, in my opinion? The head-to-head matchup, Alabama would beat South Carolina, so I would have Alabama ahead of South Carolina because it's that close. So that's how I look at things. Head-to-head matters. Don't sit here and tell me that with teams that are evenly matched, oh, well, head-to-head, but this team lost to this team. But you play to win the game, and you got to play the game. So when you beat somebody head-to-head, I've got to weigh that heavily. All right, then let me give you my last piece of criteria here. Wins versus common opponents. And I want to use the Alabama and Tennessee example here. Now, we know Tennessee, in my estimation, is securely planted in the college football playoff. In Alabama, we really don't know. We'll see later today. But Tennessee not only beat Alabama head-to-head, Tennessee also beat Vanderbilt and also beat Oklahoma. And see, Alabama lost to both of those teams. So in my estimation, regardless of what you would say, I would have Tennessee as the better team. So wins versus common opponents also matter if you don't necessarily have a head-to-head like you do in that example. So when we're talking about quality wins, strength of schedule, head-to-head matchups, and wins versus common opponents, those are all tangible data that you can use to determine who are the best teams in college football. And miss me with all the hypothetical and intangibles, because in my estimation, they just don't matter. All right, when we come back from the break, I'll give you my picks on Championship Saturday. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back into Move the Chains. And before I get to my championship game picks here on Championship Saturday in college football, I want to first and foremost, as always, take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for the opportunity to host Move the Chains. Secondly, thank you to all of the viewers, the fans, the YouTube subscribers for watching Move the Chains. I literally don't go a day or two without somebody commenting on how much they love the show. And I run into people I don't even know, which is encouraging to me, so I appreciate you watching the show. And last but not least, look, the best production crew in the business, it's not just because of what they do behind the scenes, but the conversation that we have off air about the show only help me sharpen my focus and give me even more intel and data. So again, shout out to the best production crew in the business. Hey, but you know what time it is? It's time for Second Down. Can I say something about these championship games, man? I am so excited about them. But let me say this first of all, before I even get to my picks. All of these games have something in common. And you may have already understood this. Somebody may have said it somewhere else. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody say it, so I'm going to think I'm the first. Each championship game, in the Big Ten, it's Oregon. In the SEC, it's Texas. In the ACC, it's SMU. And in the Big 12, it's Arizona State. Each championship game has at least one participant that is in its first year in that conference. Now, for a lot of people, that would be a referendum on said conference, because they say, oh, you're going to let this team come in and just win the conference possibly. I simply think that it is showing and depicting that there are transcendent programs that could be transplanted into any conference and be successful. You don't think Oregon could be placed in the SEC and be one of the top 5 teams in America? I think they could be. Right? That's where I'm going with that. Oregon, Texas is another team. They could go to the Big Ten and be one of the top 5 teams in America. That's what I think. So don't look at it as a referendum on the conference. Look at it as an opportunity for teams to show how good they are regardless of their conference affiliation. All right, but let's get to my first game pick here. Starting with the SEC, Georgia versus Texas. And we've got another graphic that I want to show you right here, just about Texas and Georgia played earlier on this season. And we understand that Georgia actually went into Austin and won by 2 touchdowns. Having said all that, 1, I think it's hard to beat a team twice, and 2, I think Georgia won that football game because Texas played outside of their character. I think Texas wins the SEC championship game later today in Atlanta, and this is why. 1, I think Texas is a team I trust. I told you this earlier on in the season. I don't think there's any game through the first 10 or 11 games that Texas played where they didn't rush the ball 30 times. And I think in this game at home, turnovers hurt Texas, and they have not been a team that has turned the ball over this year. But Georgia has been. Texas has also not been a team that has been unwilling to run the football, but Georgia has been. And Carson Beck has turned the ball over in bunches. And at times, this was the best game that Georgia's defense has played all year long. And then I saw them play against Ole Miss, and they looked like they didn't know the difference between zone and man-to-man defense. Now, I'm not saying Georgia isn't still a playoff team after this game. I think they should be. They're one of the top 10, 11 teams in America. But I think Texas comes out on top in Atlanta. And in their first year in the conference, I know this will make a lot of people mad, Texas wins the SEC. All right, what do we have next year? The Big Ten championship game, the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Oregon Ducks. James Franklin, in my estimation, has an opportunity to do something he's never done, and that's win a big game. Now, this classifies as a big game. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, Penn State didn't have to play Oregon earlier on in the regular season. They didn't play Indiana. They just played Ohio State. I understand it, but they played whom they needed to play, and they beat them. And I think Oregon is just the best team in the Big Ten. I think they're currently the best team in the country. And I've said this before, Oregon has an identity. And their identity is whatever way they need to find a way to win, they get it done. There have been games where they've been on the ropes this year, but they've found ways to hash it out and make sure that they got things correct. And like I said, when it comes to Dan Lanning and the transfer portal, they've hit on back-to-back quarterbacks. First Bo Nix and now Dylan Gabriel. And you can say some players are better than Dylan Gabriel, but you can't say players have played better than Oregon. Their running game and their opportunistic defense, they win the Big Ten. All right, and in the next game, SMU. So I've talked about Clemson a lot this year. I've said Clemson is a team that is a college football playoff contender. This proves that. But the SMU Mustangs win the ACC in my estimation. And this is what I'm telling you. People know that they were in the AAC last year. They played teams like Tulane, and they played Navy, and they played UAB. And you're thinking, well, if they come to the ACC, they're not going to be as good. But see, people tend to forget why teams are good and how they get here. Rhett Lashley's their head coach. Rhett Lashley was an offensive coordinator at Miami and at Auburn. Rhett Lashley has about 80% of his players from the state of Texas. Transfers from the University of Texas, from the University of Miami. Rhett Lashley not only understands how to coach offense because he is an offensive-minded guy, and they've got guys like Rashad Smith and Kelvin Jennings, their running back and their quarterback. One, their running back, who was a receiver at Miami, is now one of the best running backs in the conference and in the country. So SMU, in their first year in the conference, denies Clemson an opportunity to compete for a championship like they've done in the last 5 years, and SMU cements their spot in the college football playoff. And last but not least, the Big 12. And all I can tell you is Arizona State coming from the Pac-12, where the Pac-12 was its best last year in my estimation. I just remember Kenny Dillingham, the head coach of Arizona State, saying earlier this season that they are having open trials for kickers because their kicking game was trash. That's what I remember. But what I also know is when you have a quarterback that has rushed for almost 500 yards and thrown for almost 2,500 yards, you have a running back that's rushed for almost 1,400 yards and a receiver who's had over 1,100 yards receiving, you are very dynamic. They're a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to take the favorite. I'm rolling with Vegas. Arizona State wins the Big 12. All right, when we come back for the break, it'll be my nonsense narrative. Rivalry games mean more. I'm going to tell you why they don't. Back and we'll move the chains right after this. Welcome back into the show, and it's time for my favorite segment of the show. So let's not delay it, man. It's time for my nonsense narrative. You may not know this about me, but I played ball briefly while I was in college in the SEC. So I understand rivalry games. And when I graduated from college, the rivalry is huge. But let me tell you, when people say rivalry games just mean more, I'm not buying it. I think it's a crazy narrative. And I'm talking about Auburn, Alabama specifically, and also Ohio State, Michigan. Because I asked, again, my producer, Josiah, who is a very plugged into that Alabama program. huge Bama fan, but understands football. I said, Josiah, would you be okay with Alabama missing the college football playoff because they beat Auburn? He looked at me and said, no. And I said, of course you wouldn't be, because we understand what the standards are at Alabama. There are championship standards. So go and ask random Alabama fan, and you know him, and you may be one yourself. Ask yourself, are you okay if Bama doesn't make the college football playoff because you beat your rival in Auburn? Of course you're not. And when it comes to Michigan and Ryan Day, people are killing Ryan Day about being 1-4 against Michigan. He has to win a national championship or he gets fired. Well, you know what the truth of the matter is? Ryan Day gets to play for a national championship, first of all. And do you remember the guy who was in Ann Arbor last year, Jim Harbaugh, who won a national championship and then dipped to go to the Chargers? Do you know what his record was against Ohio State? It was 2-5. He's 3 games below 500 in the big game, just like Ryan Day. And if you're saying, well, but he won a national championship, well, Ryan Day has the opportunity again to win a national championship. So for you to sit now, if he had lost to everybody else and can't beat Michigan, that's one thing. This man has a, 800-something winning percentage against everybody else in his career? He hasn't gotten over the hump multiple times against Michigan, but that will change, and he can still win a national championship. So rivalry games matter, but they don't and never will mean more than winning a national championship. All right, when we come back for the break, it'll be the final segment of the show. It'll be the final drive. Back when we move the chains right after this. And welcome back in to Move the Chains. Hey, this is the final segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. Tennessee is a destination program. And I'm not just saying that because the team I picked to be a dark horse to winning a national championship, and I think they ultimately could, is in the college football playoff. They also won the College World Series in baseball. They've also got a top 5 college basketball team right now. I mean, my wife, Erica Rivers, who is a Tennessee graduate, is insufferable right now, but I have to give her credit. All right, and let's go to YouTube right here because I've got an announcement I want to make. You can not only watch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, like. It's at Move_the_Change. It's greatly appreciated. And before I sign off, a good friend of mine, Sonny Chambers, tragically lost his life this past week. And I just want to tell everybody who knew Sonny that he was an amazing guy, a great dude, graduated from high school with him. And I can't tell you exactly the last time I saw him, but I know when it was, we had a laugh like we always do. So shout out to he and his family. I'm praying for you, and I pray that everything works out in their favor. All right, it's your boy Jonathan Bam Rivers for the best production crew in the business. Again, I'm Jonathan Bam Rivers. It's been another banger. And until next time here on Move the Chains, God bless.